Hello, this is Julia Fisher here to teach you Playwriting 101. Today is our third episode in a 4-part series on structure, answering the question, how can I arrange the pieces of my play to keep my audience most engaged? And today we'll be answering that question by talking about the climax of your play. Let's get started. Before we explore what the climax of your play might look like, I'm going to give you one of the best pieces of playwriting advice I've ever received. Before you even start writing your play, know your ending. I never used to do this. I used to be a very write-as-you-go kind of girl. But here's the thing. For a traditional form play to be effective, every single line and piece of dialogue and action needs to build towards the climax of your play. And if you don't know what the climax of your play is going to be, then most of your first draft is not going to be building towards that moment, and you're going to have to rewrite almost everything. Which is fine. You can write your play that way. But if you want to save yourself some trouble and a little bit of rewriting in the future, knowing your ending first will make it a whole lot easier. It's like you have a destination on a map. And even if you're not totally sure how you're going to get there, you at least know where you're going. On the other hand, if you don't know the ending of your play, you're sort of just wandering around in the woods aimlessly, going in circles. Maybe you'll find some cool things and you'll end up somewhere, but it's not going to be as effective as knowing where you're going the whole time. So, how do you figure out your ending? Well, let's return to our handy little structure picture. If this looks unfamiliar, please go check out the beginning of my first episode in this series on inciting incident. So, the ending of your play is made up of your climax and your catharsis, and today we're going to focus on your climax. So, the climax of your play, the turning point, the highest point, the point of no return, the final battle, when it all hits the fan. The climax is the moment that your protagonist, your main character, and your antagonist, whoever they're fighting against, whether it's another person or a group of people or the environment or society or even themselves, they have their final conflict. In a traditional form play, your climax must depend on your protagonist. Your protagonist needs to make the choice to enter into this final conflict, and they need to be an active participant in that conflict. It's not going to be a very good Superman movie if Superman is sitting out the final battle. And it's also not going to be a great Superman movie if Superman is just kind of taking it from the villain and not trying to fight back at all. That's not what we want as audience members. So your protagonist needs to be a part of that climax, and they need to choose to be a part of it. This does not mean, however, that your protagonist has to win their final battle. They can be defeated or even killed. For more on this later, I will be recording a video on when and if you should kill your characters. And this also does not mean that the final conflict has to be huge and epic and have a bunch of explosions. It can be quiet or even subtle. No matter what your climax is, though, it must pass this one test. After the climax of your play, the characters cannot be quite the same. And again, this doesn't have to be super dramatic, but we want to see your characters be affected by the things that have happened to them within the course of the play. Even if your character decides to go back to their old lifestyle at the end of the play, they need to return to that lifestyle with a different perspective or way of looking at the world once they return. Here are some examples of climaxes. A character finally admits that they were wrong. A character decides to stand up for themselves or for the truth. A lost character or object is found. A couple decides to stay together or to break up. A character leaves home. A character decides to take that job or internship or other opportunity. A character realizes that they need to change. A character physically, verbally, or emotionally overcomes another character. Your climax should happen at the very end of your play, but you do need to leave a little room for the catharsis. So just as our inciting incident should happen in the first 10% of our play, we want our climax to fall about 10% at the end of your play, that final 10%. This means that if you're writing a 10-page play, your climax should happen on the bottom of page 9 or somewhere on page 10. If you're writing a full-length play, you should probably have maybe 10 to 20 pages after your climax at the end of your play. Your climax should also be something that's easily pointed to. One line of dialogue or action or group of actions. It shouldn't be a whole page or two, because then that means that the climax, that moment that everything changes, isn't very clear. And if the climax of your play isn't clear, it might be a sign that your writing isn't very clear either. I have 2 more tricks for you before we end. The first is that the ending of your play should be consistent with the beginning of your play. It can be fun to surprise your audience, but you shouldn't trick them. If there is nothing supernatural about your play at all, no hints of it or anything, the climax of your play should not be a group of surprise aliens coming in and eating everybody. It's going to feel to the audience like they've been cheated. Getting eaten by surprise aliens is also not following the rule we mentioned earlier that your protagonist must seek out, choose, and actively engage in their final battle. There are always exceptions to this, as there are with everything, but remember this: surprising the audience is good, tricking the audience is bad. You want your audience to leave your play saying, "Man, I should have seen that coming," not, "I never could have seen that coming." And here's my last secret tip for today. You don't have to write your play in order. A lot of people think that they need to start writing their play at the very beginning and just write all the way through to the end. You can write your play that way, and a lot of people do, but it doesn't work for everyone. I write my plays all out of order, just because that's what works for me. But if you know what your climax is going to be, then even if you write these plays out of order, they're at least building towards that same moment. You can even write your climax first if that works for you. So what's today's answer to our question, how can I arrange the pieces of my play to keep my audience most engaged? Our answer, to write a climax that happens in the last 10% of your pages, that changes the characters in some way, that doesn't trick the audience, and that involves your protagonist making the choice to actively engage in that final battle. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you'll join me next time in our final part to this series on structure, talking about catharsis. Thank you so much. See you next time, and happy writing.